Pascal Adolphe is a Mauritian-born writer, television producer, journalist and versatile media professional who has worked in Sydney, Australia for over 30 years. We met him during one of his visits to Mauritius in October 2024. It was an opportunity to talk about Pascal's debut novel, Gaston Saves the World, launched in 2022. The premise of the book covers some bold themes and focuses on the difficulties of building a better world.
I started my career as a newspaper journalist, so always writing, always loved stories. I think that's the bottom line. You know, I started reading Tintin books when I lived in Mauritius when I was 4 or 5 years old. I lived in Mauritius for the first 6 years of my life, and I was drawn back to it many years later. I've always been drawn back to the Indian Ocean. I've heard stories upon stories about the Mauritian past and the colonial past in particular that attracted my attention. I love satire, I love political satire, and to me some of the stories I heard were really open to that satirical angle because they were absurd. Mauritius, I'm sure you're aware, in the colonial days was very much an apartheid system. During their mid-high school years, Gaston and Patrick became inseparable, spending much of their after-school leisure time together jogging. Gaston would meet Patrick at the bridge near the bus depot that was roughly halfway between their respective homes. From there, their usual jogging route took them past their school and the local Catholic church, on their way to the local football grounds next to the former army barracks, which military folk from the colonial powers once called home. Since the island gained independence from its British colonial masters, however, the barracks, locally known as Casuarina, because of the magnificent casuarina trees which graced the once luscious landscape gardens, had been sold off as cheap communal housing and were now a haven for drug addicts and assorted thugs.
Your character Gaston in the novel has an idea for a just society, more egalitarian, and he decides to do it in some kind of, symbol of utopia. Do you see Mauritius as being this, this antithesis of the corrupt, developed, civilized world, or do you think it's or is it a symbol for something else?
Well, I think the course of the novel is that Gaston comes up with his idea, and his friend Patrick goes to Australia, and he tries to implement it there in a local council area in a small way, and fails miserably. Comes back to the island, and I never call it Mauritius; it's an island in the Indian Ocean. Comes back to the island, and he gets together with Gaston again, and they try and implement it in a small way on a small island. So that way, then the message their thoughts are that it will work on a small scale, so we can export it to the rest of the world. Because Gaston is this naive person, which I probably was when I was that age or younger, very idealistic, who thinks life should be very simple. So why have we overcomplicated it? The dying casuarinas looked on in despair while a thick layer of mulch, which once encircled the base of their trunks at the height of the colonial occupation, was being replaced by an equally thick layer of bloodstained needles, vomit, used condoms and assorted garbage thrown recklessly by the hapless population who now lived in equally hapless circumstances. In winter, it would often be dark by the time Gaston and Patrick arrived at the Casuarina sports ground. If Gaston's mother, Harriet, knew the 16-year-old boys were loitering there after dark, she would have had a heart attack. But being full of youthful bravado, they never felt threatened when they stopped to catch their breath, share in the laugh, indulge in school gossip, or sometimes discuss more serious issues as they lay on the grass staring at the star-filled sky. And away from the relatively bright lights of the village, they literally were overwhelmed by the stars in their eyes. The main storyline is about paying all workers the same, except for the few, or not the few, the many, that a little bonus to the many who make a difference to society. The doctors, the nurses, the people who work in emergency services, the people who invent things that save your life, the vaccines of the world, etc., etc. They'll be paid a little bonus, but everyone gets the same basic wage, so everyone would have a good life.
And obviously the hurdles that they face are actually human constructs.
I think it's human nature. I think human nature is the outlaw of utopia. The two main things are greed and a lust for power. If you can eliminate those two things, then good luck to you with that. I don't think you ever will. If you can eliminate that, you would have such a better world. I mean, the other thing I think people should keep at uppermost of their minds, and they don't, is that we're all mortal. We're all going to die. So why do we Some people spend their lives trying to make each other's lives a misery instead of making each other's life, the short time we have on earth, as pleasant as possible. We have the capacity to do that. We have the intelligence that we could do that. We could give food to everyone. We could have, everyone should have a house, could have a house. Everyone should be loved by someone, and everything else to me is a bonus. Someone on the radio said there are more stars in the sky than all the grains of sand in all the beaches of the world, Gaston replied. Get out of it, Patrick said incredulously. That can't be right. Have you ever tried counting grains of sand when you're on the beach? I do sometimes when I'm bored. I plunge my hand in some wet sand and try to count each grain. It's impossible. Wow, I just can't get that out of my head, Gaston. There'd be billions and billions and billions of stars. Makes you feel kind of insignificant, doesn't it, said Gaston.
Is Gaston Pascal Adolphe, or is he far removed from Pascal Adolphe?
Well, there's two main characters in there, Gaston and Patrick, right? And they both have elements of me. They also have elements that are not me at all. That's what fiction authors do. You can only write what you know and who you know, your experiences in life. So they're all a product of your own imagination, which has some basis in who you are as well.
Can humanity get rid of this notion of profit? So much imbalance exists in the world because where the capital is, the owners of capital need to make more and more profit.
Capital is not a divine thing. It's something that we created. So we can uncreate it. I call money numbers on a page. That's all it is. It's, you've got a bank account that says you have $1 million. You supposedly have $1 million, and that can give you a certain purchasing power. Now, to me, if we can do that, we can wipe a few numbers off the page, or distribute those numbers more evenly. It's as simple as that. Money doesn't have an intrinsic value. If I were to say you this plant, for instance, is worth $1 million, and everyone agrees, then it's worth $1 million. As simple as that. If we can think about money and capital in that way, then maybe we could start undoing all that stuff. I doubt that will ever happen. I wonder if David Beckham ever looks at the stars like we do. What's David Beckham got to do with us looking at the stars, Gaston? Sorry, my friend, looking at the stars like that always makes you think of aliens, Gaston started to explain. Patrick, even more puzzled, interrupted with a laugh in his voice. So that explains it. David Beckham is an alien. That's why he's such a freak on the football field. No, it's not that. I know you're joking, but please bear with me, Gaston said.
You wanted to explore this story in a book. It could have been a TV drama, feature film.
As a writer, I think when I'm writing, I visualise a scene, having worked in television as well. I think a lot of writers do this anyway. And so I write the text according to what I see in my head visually and how it goes. So I think it'll make a good film. I really do. But that's for others to judge. Now imagine if they're aliens just like us, but unlike us, they live a perfect life on a perfect planet. Let's call it Planet Utopia, where everyone is truly equal. They all have enough to eat, a place to live, no wars, no misery, etc., etc. Now these aliens from Planet Utopia also have super brains, and they make a spaceship to explore the universe. First stop, our Earth.
What's the journey to publishing a book? Do you need to look for an agent? Can you do it independently?
The first thing I did in terms of my writing was to join a writers group. That is a fantastic writers group. They critique my work, and then they gave me advice all the time, and I'd attend that religiously every week when I'm at home. And so that's helped me finish the book. To get a publisher, it took me, like I said, 1.5 years, many rejections later. That's all the best writers. Every writer's had rejections. You can't please everybody, and so some people have liked the book, some people haven't. And that's fair enough. It just took a long time, and I had a couple of offers in the end from different. I just love this American publishing house. They said all the right things, did all the right things. So but you can publish it yourself. I never wanted to be self-published. I thought, no, I want someone to give my novel a stamp of approval, and so they did this. I would love to have a major publisher, and hopefully my next one will. But that's the only way you can guarantee that you can start making a life out of writing. The Planet Utopia aliens have no idea how we organise our lives. So when they get here, what would they think of us and the way we humans live, Patrick? I'm not sure. But is this where Beckham comes into it? I get it. They see him play football and see what a genius he is, Patrick said excitedly. Sure, he'd solve the puzzle.
You've chosen the strategy of having some books in print, but also there are ebooks on quite a number of platforms.
I think that's where the industry is. Okay. You know, I think even the major writers of the world, they would be happy to sell their books through ebooks, and they do. You know, their audio books, ebooks. It's just that fragmented market that you have in television now. You have that in publishing as well. I still love a hard copy. I mean, I still read books. I can't read on the screen, but some people love it. So it's each to their own. As long as people are reading and people are getting, you know, the messages, the ideas from the books, as long as people keep reading, that's fantastic. I don't care how they do it, whether it's on ebooks or something, rather than getting those message, you know, flicking through social media at fast pace, not really taking anything in. At least books give you a chance to read, understand the ideas. It's still, you know, basic thing that we need to change the world. If we don't, writers are the ones that spew out these ideas that will help people think about how we live and maybe try to change it. Well, Beckham's not a genius, but like you just did now, lots of people call him a genius. What he really is an example of some of the things we do on Earth that the planet Utopia aliens would think is absurd. Look, you know I love football and think players like Beckham have great skills, but he's no genius.
Is there still this phenomenon that some people imagine to be like, you know, gatekeeping?
Oh no, I think there is a gatekeeping element in all those creative industries. You know, I'm sure there is a gatekeeping element. The ideas and the books and the stories should still be classified as good ones, whatever that you interpret good ones to be. But they need to be able to sell the story. So it still essentially needs to be a good story in the bottom line that has some sort of commercial appeal, for want of a better word, before it gets published. But there is an element of who you know as well, I must say. What does Beckham contribute to society besides entertainment and stinky perfume? Nothing. Nada. People who actually solve big problems in the world, like doctors, scientists, inventors, they're the geniuses. Worse still, we make the stupid decision to pay Beckham and others like him obscene amounts of money. And for what? His skills at playing a game, playing a friggin' game.
Do you think that we have moved to a new era where risks are not something that, you know, companies are willing to take, and that there is now so much volatility in the market that, you know, companies want existing demographics that they can bank on?
I agree totally with that. It is, unfortunately. There are obviously some elements that there are still independent films being made. There are books challenging the system, etc., etc. But I do overall, I think, you know, with the Marvel movies, etc. I've not seen one Marvel movie, by the way. It doesn't interest me, but I think there are ideas out there that just can't get into the system. That's the problem. Across books, across films, because ideas that challenge, they're seen as not bankable, which is, I think, rubbish. I think it's not. It's become now not giving people what they want, but giving people what they think they want, which is totally reverse. It's like the ratings on television. I think ratings are not a measurement of what's on TV. It's about setting the agenda. If you say something rates well, then everyone will think, oh, I must watch that because everyone else is watching it, which is not often the case, I think. The rest of us are told that we need to work hard to make money, not play a game. Yet if, God forbid, people actually make a real difference in society, the real geniuses ask for a pay rise, we call them greedy. Just doesn't make sense. You have a point, Gaston, but that's just the way it is, isn't it? Asked the bemused Patrick. No, that's the way it is because we just accept that it's the way it is. We don't question anything anymore. We think it's normal for Beckham to make obscene amounts of money, and for what? For not for saving lives, not for making the world a better place, not for coming up with new medicines, but for kicking a ball around a park.
What would be your advice to other indies, so to speak, you know?
My advice, for what it's worth, for independent authors is to, sure, don't compromise. However, everyone would love to get a publishing contract with a major publisher, as long as it doesn't change the whole aspect of your idea just, you know, totally around. Don't write that commercial book the way they want it. Write your own ideas. If it happens to be commercial in their eyes, then go with that as well. I mean, I'd love to get a major publisher for this book. So what can we do about it? You'll never change the world. I know it's difficult, but not impossible. You can make the world better by doing very simple things. For example, what if you simply decide to start paying everyone the same and maybe a bit more, but just a bit more, to people who really make a difference to society. I think Europeans are more attuned to that sort of stuff. You know, like you've got the people like Michel Houellebecq who write very confrontational stuff, which I love Houellebecq, and yet he's revered in France. You know, I think Europeans are much more open to these these different ideas, these fresh ideas, these ideas that do challenge the system. Whereas the Americans, even the Australians and the British and that, they're more reticent to accept that. You know? Patrick's Fair Manifesto was now on the launch pad with the debate officially over. Even though it was quite cold in the council chambers, courtesy of an air conditioning system set to blizzard, Patrick began to sweat profusely. So convinced that history was about to be made and that he would be hailed as the modern-day prophet, Patrick had been oblivious to the mayor's call to finalise votes on his motion. "All those in favour say aye," bellowed the mayor. A moment of deathly silence ensued before Patrick realised what was happening. When he did, he leapt out of his seat, almost yelling his approval. But his confident, high-pitched "Aye!" quickly retreated into a sheepish silence when he realised he was the only one who was supporting the motion.
This novel has been like the springboard for the next.
Yes.
What are you working on at the moment? And
I'm working on a novel which I've titled 50 Ways to Lose Your Lover. And again, there's that satirical element in it, a lot of based in truth, a lot of stories based on actual events, but also a lot of fiction, a lot of, not so much satire, but a lot of humour anyway still. I find I'm developing my own style of that, and I'm enjoying that that's the sort of writing I enjoy. I like to make people laugh at the same time, make them think a bit at the same time. The mayor went on to declare the motion lost. "I thought I had your support," Patrick mumbled through tears as the councillors quickly moved out of the chamber, avoiding eye contact with the sobbing Patrick, who had slumped back near his seat. Some of the councillors gave Patrick a pat on the back as if to say, "Well done," as they passed him, but none stopped to console him. He was right on one count at least. The next day, the 2 regional papers and even one national newspaper picked up the story. They all had in common some very unflattering headlines. In fact, the one newspaper that graced the front page with its story had the most unflattering headline: "Council casts off commie councillor," the Daily Mercury hollered to its readers. And that really hurt.
Gaston Saves the World is available in a number of formats, in print and on various e-publication platforms. Professionally, Pascal still works in the communications and media sector in Australia, while maintaining a passion for the arts through various side projects. He is also an associate producer on a drama feature film focusing on the trials and tribulations of an organisation called Savannah Pride, scheduled to hit cinema screens very soon.